And joining us is Matthew Dickerson. It's Tech Talk. Very good morning to you, Matthew.
It's always Tech Talk, Chris, always Tech Talk. But today we dedicate it to Tech Talk. But yeah, look, to me, Tech Talk's every minute of every day, Chris.
It is. I must admit I love it too. Now, tell me, Matt, where in the world can I hail a driverless taxi?
Well, if you happen to be travelling to Phoenix, Arizona, which I know is going to be difficult with no airlines travelling over to America at the moment, but if you do happen to duck into Phoenix, Arizona, you'll be able to grab a driverless taxi, and that'll be happening within the next few weeks. So Google bought Waymo probably a couple of years ago now, and they've been working on that, and you might have seen some of the Google cars that have been going around in driverless mode. They're at the point now where they believe it's ready to go out to the public. They've actually been running some trials. They ran a few trials before the pandemic hit us all, and they had a select group of people who were using those vehicles in driverless mode, but now they're at the point they believe they're ready to go out to the big wide world and start to have everyone use it. They've got a fairly limited space, about 130 square kilometres of the city is dedicated to it, so it's not going to be able to go everywhere. So they've got it to that space. They believe they've done enough testing in that space. They haven't actually said how many of their cars will operate in this way. They've got 600 cars in their fleet, so they haven't said how many at this stage will actually be able to go fully driverless. But it's just the beginning, isn't it, Chris? I mean, we're at the point now where you'll see a few little trials like this roll out, and then you'll start to see, I think, it start to explode. And there's been a few players in the market to try and nail it, but I think Waymo's been ahead of the rest of them. But once they start to roll it out, once people become comfortable with it, I think we'll see a lot more of this occurring.
When do you think it might happen?
Oh, within weeks, the first stage definitely will happen. They've talked about the fact that they'll be out there with these driverless taxis within weeks. So, you know, maybe by November you'll see driverless taxis going around in Phoenix, Arizona. But they also, Waymo is actually currently running tests in 25 different locations. So again, once they get to the point where they believe they've got it right for Phoenix, then it won't take long for those 25 locations to start rolling out. And that's mainly around the US, but then that'll explode around the rest of the world. How long before we'll see some in Australia? I'm not sure. Our laws seem to be a little bit behind autonomous driving, driverless driving. We seem to be very conservative in that space, and maybe that's a bit of an indication that the government doesn't really believe in this sort of technology, this sort of advancement, but I think we've got a bit of catching up to do there. So I think it'll be a couple of years before we see it in downtown Sydney, but certainly overseas it's happening now.
Now, the ACCC wants Google to pay for news content. What is the situation in other countries, Matt?
Yeah, we've talked about this a little bit before, Chris, where certainly the ACCC has been a bit of a leader around the world in trying to get Google and other social media outlets to pay for news, and I think it seems fair and reasonable. But there's been at least one country that's just basically been working on it as well, and they've got to the point where they've come to an agreement. Well, not quite. They came to an agreement, they thought, and then Google said, no, we might just appeal that. And in France, they did that appeal and they lost the appeal. So now they're at the point where Google's going to have to start to negotiate some deals with the publishers of the news that they particularly use. And so one of the threats they made was they just pull out of France, pull out of the country altogether. But I think they would look back and say, well, maybe that's a bit of an empty threat because they generate so much money from every individual country they're in. To pull out of a country or to stop delivering news in a country, I think would really inhibit the service they give or have no service there. So I think they'll basically bite the bullet, negotiate that, and I think it's just the first of a number of dominoes to fall. France has fallen, Australia's not far away, there's other countries, Germany's certainly been in discussions with them, so there's other countries around the world where they're getting to that point as well. And I think this will be good for news and the news that we consume everywhere, Australia obviously included, because it means that you'll have paid journalists, paid news organisations who are delivering news correctly and actually putting some research, making sure there's some fact-checking rather than just Billy blogs down at the pub throwing something on Facebook and everyone says that must be the right story. So I think there's a good process there where we will get some better news coming through.
We are talking technology with Matt Dickerson. And here's one that sends shivers down the spine. How do you feel about the prospect of a robotic colonoscopy?
It does send shivers down the spine, Chris, and a whole range of other places. I mean, I've never had a colonoscopy. I've certainly talked to friends and some of my older relatives who've had this done, and it sounds like a particularly unpleasant process. But would you trust a robot to go and do that process? Now, if the robot gets it right, it can obviously be much more accurate than any human possibly could be. And obviously, they've been conducting tests, and the University of Leeds has been the lead university in this particular process. So it's been working on designing this algorithm to move a flexible probe along the colon. Now, it actually uses some magnets on the outside of the body to actually make sure it's directed in the right area. It uses cameras, as you can imagine, and basically it just controls itself autonomously down the colon to take the images that it needs for the doctor to diagnose what might be wrong there. The tests so far haven't been done on humans. They've been done on artificial information or artificial products. They've been done on some pigs, but they haven't actually gone to the stage yet of doing them on humans. That's the next stage. If they can get it right, they believe they can actually even do it without being under a full general anaesthetic. And that's one of the things that's particularly scary about a normal colonoscopy. You're under full general, and when people come out of that, they can take days, weeks, even months to fully recover from being under a general anaesthetic. So this would be fantastic if that was the case. But again, that trust in technology, it's a bit like the cars, Chris, the trust in technology, trusting something to go and stick a probe in places that they shouldn't be going. Oh, it's a bit scary. But again, we trust technology with a whole range of other things, and I think this will be the next stage.
Yes, hopefully there's a doctor overseeing that one. Very, very, very close by. Now, with the COVID pandemic this year, a lot of people spending a lot more time at home. Have more computers been shipped in the third quarter of this year, Matt?
Yeah, they have been, and it's interesting because there was actually a drop in shipments earlier on the year, and that wasn't because people weren't buying computers. That was because the manufacturers just couldn't keep up with the demand. Obviously, no one could predict that there was going to be a huge surge in demand, and so the manufacturers were caught without the manufacturing capability from two perspectives. One, obviously, was the lack of manpower in the pandemic, and the second one was they hadn't actually planned on it. So we shipped across the world 79 million personal computers in the third quarter. So that's obviously July, August, September of this year. So that's an increase of 13% over last year. Now, I remember reading articles last year talking about the slow decline in the computer market and maybe the death of personal computers as we knew them. But obviously the pandemic came along and that's changed things pretty drastically. Acer had the biggest increase, 15% increase from a year ago. The largest individual company shipping PCs was Lenovo. They shipped 19.3 million computers in that quarter alone, 11% increase. HP was up there with 18.6 million. So some of the big companies that we know and love are in there shipping huge numbers. And for companies like Lenovo, like HP, even like Dell, who had a small decrease, but a lot less of a decrease than maybe predictions were around, some of those companies, I think they would see that the pandemic, even though it's been terrible across the world in terms of the number of deaths and the people impacted, from their business perspective, I think they would see that this has been a good thing for their business.
And Matt, tech heads will be wired tomorrow morning at 4 a.m. Apple have an important announcement, Matt.
Yeah, it's actually been put back a little bit, Chris. Normally, they would have their major new iPhone announcement sometime in September. There was an announcement several months ago that they were going to put that back by, in their terms, several weeks. So we now know that October 14, our time, Wednesday morning, 4 a.m. I'm sure you'll be up there at 4 a.m. watching it, Chris, as I will be. And basically, just a few little predictions. Again, these aren't confirmed. I haven't been on the phone with Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, to have a discussion about these things. This is information that I've basically obtained from a whole range of rumour sites. So it looks like there'll be 4 new iPhones launched, iPhone 12s, presumably they'll be called. In iPhone 11 at the moment, there are 3 models. There will be 4 new iPhone 12s. There'll be an iPhone 12 mini with a smaller screen, a 5.4-inch screen. There'll be an iPhone 12 standard, 6.1-inch. There'll be an iPhone 12 Pro and then a Pro Max. The Pro Max will be the biggest screen ever, 6.7-inch. That'll be the biggest screen ever on an iPhone. Both Pro phones will have 3 cameras as they do now, but the zoom will be improved. At the moment, you've got a 2x zoom. The Pros will have a 4 times and a 5 times zoom on the Pro Max. Lots of other minor improvements. The processor will be improved. There will be a faster processor, about 40 times faster. They'll change the shape slightly to look like an old iPhone 4. Everything new is old again. They'll improve the breakage ability of the actual screen of the phone. Wireless chargers and it will improve. And in terms of colours, they'll probably cut back on the base model colours a little bit. They tried a couple of new colours this year, but it looks like they'll end up with black and white, red, blue and green. They'll have dropped the yellow out of the range. And in the Pro models, they'll have 4 colours, but they'll replace the midnight green, it appears, with a navy blue. And they'll also introduce a graphite alongside the gold and silver. So the one thing I really can't determine at this stage, Chris, that I won't know for sure until tomorrow, is the charging port. The European Commission put a ruling through earlier in the year that said that all individual componentry, no matter who the manufacturer was, coming into Europe from now on need to be USB-C. Now, that's not in law yet, but that's something that I think that most manufacturers will adhere to. But Apple likes to do things a bit differently. They like to say they're innovating, or some people might like to say that they're just keeping their own market. But whether the actual iPhone 12s come out tomorrow with a Lightning port or USB-C, I can't say at this stage. I'm leaning towards a Lightning port, but it may well be USB-C.
Right. We will probably talk more about that next week. Thanks for your time this morning, Matt, and we'll do it again next week.
Sounds great, Chris. Thanks very much.